Hi guys, Olive here. Here today to talk to you about 10 of the strangest nonfiction books I have ever read. I read some pretty weird nonfiction books. If you have followed me or this channel for any length of time, then you probably already know that. I do like to read books that are very niche, that are on very specific topics. And they sometimes can be a little bit gross or morbid, or just be about something that a more normal person than me wouldn't ever think to read a book about. But I'm a very naturally curious person, and there are nonfiction books out there about pretty much any topic imaginable. So when I lay my eyes on those types of books, I just can't help myself. So just for fun, I thought in today's video I would highlight 10 of the weirdest nonfiction books I have ever read. But these aren't just weird nonfiction books, they're also really good, weird nonfiction books. I really enjoyed reading all of these. I learned a lot from them, so I really recommend them, even if they will earn you some side eyes if you choose to read them in public. We'll start on the tamer side before I move into the really kooky and or macabre books that are on this list. A few years back, I read a book called Rust, The Longest War by Jonathan Waldman. And this book blends science, history, and the author's own personal anecdotes as he discusses the all-too-common yet extremely destructive red-orange splotching on metal that we call rust. At the start of this book, you'll get an in-depth lesson about what rust actually is. The short answer is that it's the corrosion of iron as it reacts with oxygen, but learning how all that works is absolutely fascinating. And then the author moves into a discussion about our human relationship with rust over the centuries, how we're actively working against it, trying to keep it from compromising our structures and therefore our infrastructure, but also specific instances in which we're working with it. Like he tells the story of an artist who sneaks into an old steel mill to take these beautiful photographs of rust. But by far, the single most interesting chapter in this entire book is, surprisingly enough, about cans, as in cans of foodstuffs. You might have at least one of them in your pantry right now, and you might be under the mistaken impression that they are very simple. It should just be find metal can, take food, put into can, seal. Done, right? Wrong. You actually need different linings for those cans, depending on what you're trying to can. The contents matter, and the chemical makeup of the contents matter in the makeup of the lining, because at the same time, you're trying to protect the metal can from the food item so that the metal doesn't begin to rust as it's sitting on your shelf, but you're also trying to protect the contents from the metal so that the metal doesn't leach into the food before you get a chance to eat it. It is very complex. It is absolutely fascinating. You will never look at a can on your shelf the same way again, and you will never look at rust the same way again after reading this book. But now let's move into talking about another book about a ubiquitous substance that I'm guessing you have plenty of personal experience with, but that you probably also never thought to read a book about. It's called The Joy of Sweat, The Strange Science of Perspiration by Sarah Everts. This is a book about the human method of keeping cool, which is in fact very different than that of other creatures here on Earth. The author starts off by talking about how and why we sweat before moving into our collective mixed feelings about sweating. How we welcome sweating in certain locations, like at the gym or in the sauna, but how we very well might be embarrassed by heavy sweating outside of those places. To illustrate our complicated relationship with sweating, this author talks about some traveling that she did to participate in different sweaty activities, like a performance held inside of a sauna, but also a round of speed dating in which you select your match not based on their conversational skills, but instead based on the aroma of their perspiration, since different chemicals are released when we sweat. This book is such a happy marriage of hard science and social science. You may scoff at this title, but you will learn so much by reading this. Another book that has a social element to it is called In Search of Mycotopia: Citizen Science, Fungi Fanatics, and the Untapped Potential of Mushrooms by Doug Bierend. Mushrooms have definitely been blooming in popularity recently. I think books like Entangled Life by Merlin Sheldrake have people really excited about the science of mushrooms. But this book goes one step further. This book is essentially a series of profiles of people who are working with mushrooms in different and sometimes very surprising capacities. There are the scientists who study mushrooms, of course, but then there are people in the business of mushrooms, people who grow them, people who sell them in order to eat them. And then finally, probably the most interesting people are the enthusiasts, people who organize festivals around mushrooms, people who seek out online communities in order to chat about mushrooms. You learn about those people in this book, but you also get a taste for why they're so hyped about mushrooms, because the author divulges some really interesting information about mushrooms all along the way. Of course, many people's first thought when they hear mushrooms will be psychedelics, but they have so much more to offer than just that, and this book proves it. The next one is more on the personal side as well, and it's one of those highly specific books that I doubt you've even heard of before, unless you're a regular viewer of my channel. It's called Flying Blind: One Man's Adventures Battling Buckthorn, Making Peace with Authority, and Creating a Home for Endangered Bats by Dawn Mitchell. This is a memoir in which the author discusses first acquiring a farm in Vermont and making it home, but then years later, after the author retired, in an effort to cut costs of maintaining such a large property to ease his overall tax burden, he talks about the long and arduous process of getting his land ready to be labeled as protected habitat for the Indiana bats who lived there. So this is a book about bats. But it's also so much more than that, because it's about dealing with an invasive species, caring for the land, facing his own issues with authority he didn't even know he had. Still, in his later life, they all stemmed from his issues with his father growing up. Dealing with Uncle Sam tends to have that effect on people. So this is a highly specific book about a highly specific time in this author's life. But I cannot overstate just how cozy of a book this is. I still have the best memories of curling up with this one. We'll stay on the nature topic. I do read a lot of nature nonfiction, so I guess it's unsurprising that a lot of books about plants and animals have made their way onto this list. But this next book I'm going to talk about, it's about a flying creature that I think the general public may like even less than they like bats, if that's possible. It's called Homing: On Pigeons, Dwelling, and Why We Return by John Day. This book is about this author's experience keeping and raising homing pigeons, but throughout the entire book, he's also having a much larger discussion about the concept of home and how pigeons are tied to that, because first and foremost, many people do see them as homely, meaning ugly, but pigeons also have this absolutely uncanny ability that we still don't fully understand to find their way back home. And because of that homing instinct, people throughout history, mainly working class people, have kept pigeons and even raised them. So just like with the last several books, it seems to be a theme of this list, this book is about pigeons. But it's also about so much more than that, especially because the concept, the idea of home is so deeply worked into pretty much every discussion in this book. You might not ever think pigeons are beautiful, but this book absolutely is. The last book on this list that's tied to an animal is called Cattail: The Wild, Weird Battle to Save the Florida Panther by Craig Pittman. And this book tells the absolutely unbelievable true story of how a group of people came together to fight for a dying species, the Florida panther, that absolutely had the odds stacked against it, with ever-worsening habitat loss and dangers all around it, everything from people wielding guns to cars flying down highways. The plan that this group eventually came up with to save the Florida panther was, on the surface, a pretty simple one, a pretty straightforward one, but not the easiest one to carry out. Just much easier said than done. And this is Florida we're talking about here. So if something crazy can happen, it absolutely will happen. If you like your books on the adventurous side, I'm willing to bet you'll find this entertaining. I'm not done with Florida yet, though. The next book on this weirdest nonfiction books list is called Hotel Scarface, where cocaine cowboys partied and plotted to control Miami by Robin Farzad, which zooms in on this one hotel/nightclub in Miami that was very closely linked to the cocaine trade in the 70s and 80s, and very well may have served as inspiration for the movie Scarface. Reading about this whole underworld will have you struggling to believe that what you're reading is actually nonfiction, but believe it or not, this stuff happened. And if you're also a fan of documentaries, I absolutely recommend you pair this one up with any or even all of the Cocaine Cowboys documentaries if you really want an inside look at how drug money essentially built the city of Miami. Some more crazy history. I read a whole book about the rabies virus. It's called Rabid, A Cultural History of the World's Most Diabolical Virus by Bill Wasik and Monica Murphy. I actually picked up this book right after I came down with a case of shingles. I was on the hunt for a book about the chickenpox virus, which causes shingles and travels via the nerves, but it didn't exist. So instead, I decided to pick up this book about a different virus that targets the nervous system. In this book, you'll first get a quick look at the science of how the rabies virus works before these authors make good on this book's subtitle and move into a discussion about our historical and cultural understanding of the rabies virus and our feelings toward the rabies virus. And that includes an absolutely fascinating conversation about how rabies might have been responsible for the creation of some of our most favorite paranormal creatures, namely werewolves and vampires. So if you're a fan of horror or the paranormal and you're looking to get into reading more nonfiction, may I present you with this gateway drug of a book about a lethal virus. On that morbid note, let me seize this opportunity to bring up one of the really macabre types of books that I just seem to love so much. And this one's title is simply excellent. It's called Will My Cat Eat My Eyeballs? Big Questions from Tiny Mortals About Death by Caitlin Doughty. This is the third book by mortician Caitlin Doughty. Her previous two books, also about death, are fabulous as well. But when she was on book tour promoting those two books, she was actually asked some very blunt, very direct, and very interesting questions about death and dying by children, of all people. She got questions like, what do dead bodies smell like? Do bodies decaying in a cemetery affect the quality of the drinking water? Is that whole thing about seeing the white light when you're dying actually true? And then, of course, after I die, will my cat eat my eyeballs? Caitlin Doughty respectfully and carefully answers those questions in this book, and you don't need to be a precocious youngster in order to enjoy her responses. If you are a fan of physical books, I can tell you that the illustrations in this book really do add something. But if you prefer audiobooks, you might want to consider that route instead, because Caitlin Doughty narrates all of her books on audiobook, and her voice is perfection. I mean, she even sounds like a mortician. Then finally, the last weird nonfiction book that I will bring up today is called Sex, Lies, and Handwriting. A top expert reveals the secrets hidden in your handwriting by Michelle Dresbold. This was written by a handwriting expert who looks at different peculiarities present in people's handwriting that reveals things about their personality. The way certain letters are written, a certain slant to our script, a hook that is or isn't present on a specific letter, all of these things can say something about who we are, good, bad, or even evil. This one will have you looking more closely at your own handwriting, but also the handwriting of anyone who's in your life who is unlucky enough to have written something down in your presence around the time that you read this book. And I would say I have more confidence in this author than the average reader, because I was actually lucky enough to interview this author, and after the interview was done, she offered to look at my handwriting, and she picked up on something that I tell you she would have had no way of knowing, besides picking it up in the way I wrote my name. So I recommend this and then some. So those are 10 of the weirdest nonfiction books I have read thus far in my life. Let me know in the comments below if you're intrigued by any of these, if you might consider picking them up. And you can also tell me in the comments, what are the weirdest nonfiction books you have ever read? As I said, I am a perpetually, insatiably curious person. I'm always looking for more great nonfiction books to read, especially if they're on the strange side. So I want to hear your recommendations. All the books that I recommended today in this video will be listed and linked for you in the description box below. They are there for your clicking convenience. And at the very bottom of the exact same description box, you'll also see links to everywhere you can find me around the internets, like Goodreads, Instagram, the Storygraph, all the places I'm the most active, in case you want to keep up with what weird nonfiction books I'm currently reading or what I'm doing right now. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you're having a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.